A black man arrives in the city, hoping to find a good job to support his mother. But something unexpected happens. Just before his interview, he notices a young boy standing alone in front of a construction site looking lost. Suddenly, a wooden beam fell from a passing truck heading straight for where the boy was standing. Without hesitation, he rushes forward, saving the boy in the nick of time, but in doing so, he misses his interview. It seems like another failure, another lost opportunity. But what he doesn't realize is that his act of bravery is about to open a door to a chance he never could have imagined. Jamal had always been a fighter. At 36 years old, he had spent most of his life in a small southern town, working tirelessly to provide for his aging mother. Life had never been easy, but he never complained. He took whatever jobs he could find: construction, warehouse shifts, janitorial work, anything that put food on the table. But lately, work had dried up and the bills kept piling higher. His mother's health was declining, and the small pension she received barely covered her medication. He knew he had to do something. He couldn't just sit there and watch her struggle. That's why he made the toughest decision of his life: to leave home and try his luck in New York City. It wasn't just a move, it was a leap of faith. The city was nothing like the quiet town he had left behind. It was loud, fast, overwhelming, and yet, for the first time in a long time, Jamal felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He had an interview at a major construction site, one that promised a steady paycheck, benefits, and a chance at stability. It wasn't a dream job, but it was a start. He had spent his last few dollars on a crisp, new, button-down shirt, something that made him look presentable, professional, worthy of the opportunity. He carried himself with confidence, even though deep inside he knew everything was riding on this one shot. As he walked through the crowded streets, the towering skyscrapers casting long shadows over him, he kept rehearsing what he would say in the interview. "I'm hard-working, I learn fast, I don't complain, just give me a chance." He knew he wasn't the most qualified candidate, but he had something not everyone had: determination and a hunger to prove himself. He checked his watch. He was making good time. If everything went according to plan, he'd arrive a few minutes early, just as he had practiced. But life had a funny way of throwing obstacles in his path. As Jamal neared the construction site, his mind was fixed on the interview ahead. He had planned every word, every answer, every way he could prove he was the right man for the job. This was his one shot, his chance to finally break free from the struggle that had followed him his entire life. He couldn't afford distractions, not now. He was making good time, keeping his stride steady, his heartbeat calm, rehearsing his introduction in his head. "I'm hard-working, I learn fast, I don't complain, just give me a chance." Then, just as he was about to cross the street toward the entrance, something pulled at the edge of his vision. A child, standing alone near the front of a fast food restaurant, just across from the construction site. For a moment, Jamal's gaze flicked toward him. A little boy, no older than 5, standing still in the middle of the busy sidewalk. He was dressed neatly, his small navy blue jacket zipped up to his chin. His khaki pants slightly wrinkled but otherwise well kept, and yet, despite his clean-cut appearance, dust from the construction site clung to his sleeves and speckled the front of his jacket. A dark smudge stained the knee of his pants, like he had fallen at some point and gotten back up without bothering to brush himself off. His small white sneakers were scuffed at the toes, his hands balled into uncertain fists at his sides. His face was round, his cheeks slightly flushed, but his wide brown eyes darted around anxiously, scanning the passing crowd as if searching for someone, or waiting for someone to find him. Jamal slowed for half a second, something in his gut twisting. A kid this young shouldn't be standing here alone. But then he caught himself. He was already running on limited time, and stopping now would only slow him down. "Not my business, not right now." He forced himself to keep moving, one step, then another, then a sharp metallic clank rang out from the street. Jamal's head snapped toward the sound just in time to see it: a flatbed truck pulling into the construction site, its back loaded high with supplies. A worker at the rear was attempting to tighten the straps securing the cargo, but he was already too late. A long wooden beam had shifted, its weight unbalanced, and before anyone could react, it slid free, teetering dangerously over the edge of the truck's bed, then suddenly dropped. right toward the boy. Jamal's body moved before his mind could process what was happening. His heartbeat roared in his ears as he lunged forward, feet pounding against the pavement. "Hey, watch out!" he yelled, but the boy, frozen in place, his wide eyes locking onto the falling beam, didn't move. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. In the last possible second, Jamal threw himself forward, grabbing the boy by the shoulders and yanking him back. The wooden beam slammed into the sidewalk just inches from where the child had been standing, sending a cloud of dust and splinters into the air. A sharp tearing sound filled Jamal's ears, his shirt sleeve snagging against the rough wood, ripping from the elbow down. His only good shirt, the one he had spent his last few dollars on, the one meant to make a strong impression at his interview, was ruined, but at that moment it didn't matter. He barely noticed the workers shouting from the truck, scrambling to secure the rest of the load. He barely registered the sting of the cold air against his now bare arm. All he could focus on was the tiny hands clutching onto his torn sleeve, the boy's chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths, his wide, frightened eyes staring up at Jamal as if he was the only solid thing in a world that had just come crashing down around him. Jamal's breath was still caught in his chest as the dust settled around them. The heavy wooden beam lay sprawled across the sidewalk, its edges rough and splintered from the impact. If he had been just 1 second slower, if he had kept walking, if he had ignored that small pull in his gut, if he had let himself believe it wasn't his problem, the boy wouldn't be standing here right now. The thought sent a cold shiver through him, sharp and unsafe. The child was still gripping his torn sleeve, his small fingers curling tightly into the fabric as if letting go would make the world collapse beneath him. His chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths, his wide brown eyes locked onto Jamal's face, searching for something, safety, reassurance, an answer to a question he didn't know how to ask. Up close, Jamal could see the faint tremble in his small shoulders, the way his lips were pressed together as if he was trying to hold something back, some emotion too big for his tiny frame to contain. Jamal exhaled slowly, forcing his own heartbeat to steady. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low and even, like calming a spooked animal. "You okay, kid?" The boy didn't answer right away. His small fingers twitched against the fabric of Jamal's shirt, then hesitated, as if suddenly realizing he was holding on to a stranger. His hands dropped back to his sides, but he didn't step away. He blinked a few times, his breath still uneven. Then finally he gave the tiniest nod. Jamal studied him for a second longer. The kid was shaken, that much was obvious, but aside from the dust coating his jacket and the faint smudge on his cheek, he didn't look hurt. That was the important part, but something still wasn't right. Why was he out here alone? Jamal glanced around. The fast food restaurant behind them was packed with customers, the sidewalks filled with the usual rush of people moving from one place to another, but no one had come running for the kid. No frantic parent pushing through the crowd, no concerned voice calling his name. Jamal frowned. A child that young, dressed that neatly, shouldn't be standing in the middle of the city without someone looking for him. "Where's your mom, little man?" Jamal asked, keeping his tone gentle but firm. At the mention of his mother, the boy's expression shifted, his lips parted slightly, his eyes flicking toward the street, and then, just as quickly, his gaze dropped to his shoes. He didn't answer. Instead, he squeezed his hands into small fists at his sides, his shoulders hunching ever so slightly, like he was trying to make himself smaller. That reaction told Jamal everything he needed to know. This wasn't just a case of a kid who wandered off and got lost for a few minutes. This was something more, something worse. Jamal crouched down so he was at eye level, his torn sleeve brushing against his arm as he moved. "Hey," he said, softer this time. "You lost?" The boy's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He hesitated, his small fingers twitching again, then barely above a whisper he nodded. Jamal felt a tightness settle in his chest. He glanced at his watch, his interview. He was supposed to be inside that construction site right now, proving that he was worth hiring, proving that he could be the man his mother needed him to be. But as he looked back at the boy in front of him, standing there, covered in dust, small and uncertain, with no one in sight coming to claim him, Jamal knew he wasn't going anywhere just yet. Jamal exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the small boy standing in front of him. Lost. Alone. Scared. He had seen that look before on kids in rough neighborhoods who had no one to look after them, on the faces of people who had been left behind by the world. But this boy wasn't just another kid from the streets. His clothes were too clean, too well kept, even with the dust and dirt clinging to him. He didn't look neglected, he looked out of place. That only made it worse. Someone had to be looking for him. Someone had to be worried sick right now. Jamal rubbed a hand down his face, feeling the roughness of his unshaven jaw. He was running out of time. His interview was supposed to start in a few minutes. He should have been inside that construction site, shaking hands, proving himself. But how the hell was he supposed to walk away now? He glanced down at the boy again. The kid was still staring at his shoes, his small fingers clenching and unclenching at his sides, like he wasn't sure what to do with them. He looked exhausted, not just physically, but in the way that came from holding in too much for too long. Jamal crouched down again, keeping his voice steady. "What's your name, little man?" The boy hesitated, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Then, so quietly that Jamal almost didn't hear him over the city noise, he whispered, "Liam." "All right, Liam." Jamal gave him a small nod. "That's a strong name. You out here by yourself?" Liam shook his head, barely. Jamal narrowed his eyes slightly. "Who were you with?" Liam swallowed, his small hands tightening into fists again. He didn't answer. Jamal sighed. The kid was scared, that much was obvious, and for some reason he wasn't giving up any information. Maybe he was afraid he'd get in trouble. Maybe he didn't trust Jamal yet. Either way, standing out here on the sidewalk wasn't going to get them anywhere. His stomach clenched as he checked his watch again. He could already hear the voice in his head, his mother's voice, the one that always told him to be responsible, to show up on time, to never waste an opportunity when it came knocking. He had promised her he would do better. He had promised himself, too. But damn it, what was he supposed to do? Leave a 5-year-old alone and hope someone else noticed? Hope whoever was supposed to be looking after him finally showed up? Not happening. Jamal let out a slow breath and glanced toward the fast food restaurant behind them. It was warm inside, and more importantly, it was safe. He stood up, dusted off his torn sleeve like it didn't matter, and jerked his chin toward the door. "Come on, kid, let's get you something to eat." Liam hesitated, his big brown eyes flicking up to Jamal's face, then back down at his own sneakers. Jamal could see the uncertainty, the wariness, but there was something else too. Relief. He wasn't sure if the kid even realized it, but there was a part of him that wanted to trust Jamal. He just didn't know how yet. After a few seconds, Liam gave a tiny nod and followed Jamal inside. The restaurant was busy, the air thick with the smell of fries and grilled meat. The sound of overlapping conversations and beeping fryers filled the space, but Jamal barely noticed. He led Liam to the counter, reaching into his pocket, fingers brushing against the few crumpled bills he had left. This wasn't exactly what he had planned to spend his last bit of money on, but hell, plans had already gone out the window today. He ordered a kid's meal, keeping it simple. Liam didn't say a word the entire time, just stood quietly beside him, staring up at the menu like it was written in a different language. When the food came, Jamal carried the tray over to a small table near the window and set it down. "Go ahead, eat," he said, nodding toward the food. Liam hesitated again, then slowly climbed into the seat across from him. He picked up a fry, turned it over in his fingers for a second, then finally took a small bite. It was only after the first taste that he relaxed just enough for the tension in his shoulders to ease. Jamal watched him for a moment, trying to piece together the puzzle. The kid was hungry but not starving. He was scared but not panicked. He was clean but out of place. Someone had to be looking for him. He leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone casual. "So, Liam, you said you weren't alone earlier. Who were you with?" Liam swallowed, staring down at his food. For a second, Jamal thought he wouldn't answer. But then, in a small, hesitant voice, Liam murmured, "My mom." Jamal sat back slightly. "Okay, that was progress." "She was with you when you got here?" he asked. Liam shook his head, pushing a fry across his tray. "She was working," he said softly. "She told me to stay in the car with the driver, said she'd take me to the park when she was done." Jamal frowned. "The driver?" Liam nodded. But he left. He got a phone call and said he had to go. I was scared in the car by myself, so I got out to find her, but I don't know where she is." Jamal exhaled through his nose, rubbing a hand down his face. Damn. The kid wasn't just lost. He had been left behind. Jamal sat back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the table as he processed what Liam had just told him. The kid had been left alone in a car, scared, waiting for a mother who had no idea he was missing. Worse, the one person who was supposed to be watching him had just walked off, leaving a 5-year-old to fend for himself in the middle of a busy city. Jamal clenched his jaw. It didn't sit right with him. None of it did. He studied Liam for a moment. The boy was still picking at his fries, rolling one between his small fingers, eyes downcast. He wasn't crying, he wasn't panicking, but there was a quiet kind of fear in the way he held himself, the kind that didn't explode out of you but instead buried itself deep in your chest, heavy and suffocating. Jamal knew that kind of fear. He had lived it, and now this kid was sitting across from him, alone in a crowded restaurant, not knowing what was supposed to happen next. Jamal exhaled sharply, checked his watch, and immediately felt a pit form in his stomach. He was late. He had been so focused on getting Liam somewhere safe that he hadn't realized just how much time had slipped away. His interview, the one chance he had to turn things around, to build a stable future for himself and his mother, was already starting without him. He should have been there, standing in front of the site manager, proving that he was the kind of man they could count on. Instead, he was here, sitting across from a lost child, watching him struggle to finish a meal because his stomach was too tight with nerves to eat properly. Jamal rubbed a hand down his face. Damn it. He could still go. He could still run across the street, explain the situation, hope they gave him a chance despite being late. But then what? Leave Liam here alone again, hoping someone else did the right thing? Hope a stranger had enough heart to step in when it wasn't their responsibility? He already knew the answer. People ignored kids like Liam all the time. Hell, he almost had too. Jamal took a slow breath, then leaned forward, lowering his voice so only Liam could hear. "All right, listen, we're gonna find your mom, okay? I'll help you, but I gotta know, do you remember what she was wearing today?" Liam hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod. "A blue jacket," he murmured. "She always wears blue when she's at work." Jamal nodded. "Okay, that's good. Do you remember her phone number?" Liam's lips pressed together. His small fingers gripped the edge of his tray, his knuckles turning white. I don't know," he admitted. His voice was so small it barely made it across the table. Jamal sighed. Of course. He couldn't blame the kid. He was only 5, and these days, most kids didn't memorize numbers when everything was stored in a phone. That meant there was only one option left. They had to go to the construction site. Jamal ran a hand through his short, cropped hair, his mind working through the problem. There was no guarantee they'd let him in, especially now that he was late. The site manager would probably take one look at him, torn-sleeved, wrinkled shirt, a damn kid in tow, and tell him to get lost. But what other choice did he have? Jamal pushed his chair back and stood, grabbing the tray and tossing the half-eaten meal into the trash. "Come on, kid, we're gonna find your mom." Liam slid out of his seat without hesitation this time. He didn't reach for Jamal's hand, but he stayed close, his small steps quick as he followed him out the door and back onto the busy street. The construction site loomed ahead, all steel beams and scaffolding, the sound of drills and heavy machinery filling the air. A large chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, with a security booth stationed at the main entrance. Jamal's stomach tightened. He knew exactly how this was going to look. Late, underdressed, and dragging along a kid that didn't belong there. This wasn't exactly the first impression he had been hoping for. But none of that mattered right now. He stepped up to the gate, keeping his shoulders squared as he approached the security guard, a stocky white guy in his 50s with a graying beard and tired eyes. The guard barely glanced up from his clipboard before grunting. "You got business here?" Jamal cleared his throat. "Yeah? I had an interview scheduled for today. But—" The guard cut him off with a shake of his head. "If you're late, you're out of luck. Hiring manager's already started." Jamal expected that. He had braced himself for it, but before he could explain further, Liam suddenly stepped forward, gripping the fence with both hands, his small fingers curling through the metal links. His voice was soft but firm when he spoke. "My mom works here." The guard finally looked up. His eyes flicked between Jamal and Liam, narrowing slightly in suspicion. "That right?" Liam nodded. "She's wearing a blue jacket." Jamal could see the way the guard hesitated, torn between dismissing them outright or actually listening. It was just enough of an opening. Jamal exhaled sharply, then pressed forward. "Look, man, the kid's lost. He got separated from his mom and she's somewhere in there. I'm not trying to make trouble. I just need to find her." The guard studied them for a long moment. Then, with a sigh, he muttered, "Wait here," before turning and speaking into his radio. Jamal felt Liam shift beside him, the boy's small fingers still gripping the fence, his eyes scanning the crowd inside the construction site, searching for a familiar face. Jamal could feel the tension radiating off him, hope battling against fear. A minute passed. Then another. Then a woman's voice cut through the air like a bullet. "Liam." Jamal barely had time to react before Liam suddenly spun on his heel and took off running. His small sneakers kicked up dust as he sprinted toward the woman, now pushing her way through the crowd, a tall, commanding figure in a crisp blue jacket, her dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her face a mixture of panic and sheer relief. Jamal blinked. That's her? He had expected a construction worker, maybe a foreman. Not the damn CEO. Jamal barely had time to process what was happening before Liam was already bolting across the construction site, his small legs moving as fast as they could carry him. His sneakers kicked up dust, his arms pumping as he weaved through the maze of steel beams and equipment, running straight toward the woman in the blue jacket. Her stride was long, urgent, her sharp heels clicking against the pavement as she pushed past workers and engineers alike, her face frozen somewhere between pure relief and sheer panic. Then impact. Liam crashed into her legs, wrapping his small arms around her waist with a force that nearly knocked her off balance. She didn't hesitate. She immediately dropped to her knees, enveloping him in a fierce hug, her hands running over his arms, his back, his face, as if she needed to physically confirm he was really there, really safe. "Oh my God, Liam," she breathed, pulling him closer, her fingers tangling in his dusty jacket. Her voice was shaking, barely held together, and for the first time since Jamal had met the kid, Liam broke down completely, his small hands fisted into the fabric of her coat as his chest heaved with sobs, all the fear he had been holding in finally spilling out at once. Jamal exhaled, his shoulders loosening as he watched the scene unfold. That's his mom, no doubt about it. But as he took a step back, giving them space, he noticed something else, the way the workers nearby were stopping in their tracks, their conversations halting as they turned to stare at the woman now holding Liam close. There was something about the way they looked at her, not just recognition, but respect, deference, like she wasn't just another employee, like she was someone important. And then, just as realization started to sink in, Jamal saw it, the company logo embroidered on the chest of her coat, along with the name printed just below it in bold capital letters. Olivia Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. No way. Liam's mom wasn't just an engineer. She wasn't a site manager or a foreman or some office executive overseeing paperwork from a distance. She was the damn CEO of the entire operation, the woman running the multi-million-dollar project he was supposed to be interviewing for. Jamal's brain scrambled to catch up, but before he could process the full weight of it, Olivia lifted her head, her sharp eyes locking onto him for the first time. It was only then that he realized she had been so focused on Liam that she hadn't even noticed him standing there. Her gaze flicked over him quickly, taking in everything, his torn sleeve, the dust clinging to his shirt, the way he stood slightly apart from the crowd, like he wasn't sure if he should stay or go. Then her expression shifted, something unreadable flashing behind her sharp brown eyes. "You." Her voice wasn't angry, but it was firm, commanding, the kind of voice that made people stop and listen. Jamal straightened instinctively. "Yeah," he said, clearing his throat. "Me." She was already standing, her movements smooth, calculated, like someone used to taking charge. She kept one hand on Liam's shoulder, steadying him as she turned fully to face Jamal. "Did you find him?" Jamal hesitated, glancing at Liam, who was still sniffling against her side, his small fingers gripping the fabric of her coat like he wasn't ready to let go yet. Then he nodded. "Yeah. He was standing outside the fast food place across the street. He told me he was looking for his mom." His voice was steady, but he could hear the slight edge in it, the unspoken accusation. Olivia's jaw tensed, just for a second, before she crouched down again, brushing a strand of hair from Liam's forehead. "Sweetheart, why did you leave the car?" Liam shifted on his feet, his small fingers twisting the hem of her coat. "The driver left," he mumbled. "He got a phone call and said he had to go. I got scared in the car by myself." His voice cracked slightly at the last part, his eyes lowering like he thought he was in trouble. "I just wanted to find you." Olivia closed her eyes for a brief second, exhaling sharply. When she looked back up at Liam, her expression softened, but her grip on his shoulder tightened just slightly, like she was anchoring herself. "I'm so sorry, baby, I didn't know." Jamal could see the way her fingers curled slightly against her side, could hear the controlled breath she took before standing again. She was angry. Not at Liam, at herself. At whoever had left him alone. She turned back to Jamal then, her gaze sharper now, more calculating. "You stayed with him?" Jamal nodded. "Yeah, got him something to eat, made sure he was all right, brought him here to find you." He shrugged slightly, as if it was no big deal, but something about the way Olivia was looking at him made him feel like it was. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just studied him, like she was trying to figure something out. Then she glanced past him, her gaze flicking toward the security guard at the entrance, then toward the workers gathered nearby. "Someone get me the name of the driver assigned to my son this morning," she said, her voice cool, professional. "I want him on the phone in 5 minutes." A few of the employees immediately scrambled into motion. Clearly, when Olivia Carter spoke, people listened. Jamal took another step back, instinct telling him this was the part where he left. Liam was safe, that was all that mattered. But before he could turn, Olivia's gaze snapped back to him. "You had an interview today." It wasn't a question. Jamal blinked. "Yeah," he admitted. "I was supposed to be here a while ago, but—" Her eyes flicked to his torn sleeve, then back up to his face. "You missed it." Jamal's jaw tightened slightly. Not like he needed the reminder. "Guess so." Another beat of silence stretched between them. Then Olivia shifted Liam to her other side, straightened her coat, and said something that Jamal never saw coming. "You're hired." Jamal blinked. Did he hear that right? "What?" "I need people like you," Olivia said simply, her voice cool and measured. "People who don't hesitate to step up when something needs to be done. People who don't turn away just because something isn't their responsibility. You want the job? It's yours." Jamal stared at her for a long second, waiting for the catch, for the but that usually followed when someone offered a favor. But it didn't come. Olivia just held his gaze, unwavering, as if daring him to turn it down. Jamal exhaled, nodded once, and extended his hand. "All right, I'll take it." Olivier shook his hand, firm and confident, then turned her full attention back to Liam, running a soothing hand over his back as she murmured something to him. Jamal took it as his cue to leave. As he walked toward the gate, the security guard, who had almost turned him away, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Jamal shoved his hands into his pockets as he stepped out onto the sidewalk, his torn sleeve flapping slightly in the cool breeze. He had walked into that construction site expecting an interview. He had walked out with something even better, a job he hadn't even applied for. He glanced back over his shoulder once. Olivia was still kneeling beside Liam, smoothing down his jacket, murmuring something only he could hear. Her expression had softened, the sharp authority she had carried earlier now laced with something undeniably human guilt, love, relief. The way she held him, the way she looked at him, it was clear this was a woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, but at the end of the day, nothing mattered more to her than that little boy. Jamal exhaled, shaking his head slightly as he turned back toward the street. What a day. He had come here desperate for a job, for a chance to turn his life around, and somehow he had left with more than just a paycheck. Because Olivia hadn't hired him out of pity. She hadn't given him the job because of what happened with Liam. She had seen something in him. Something real. Something he had spent years trying to prove to people who never bothered to look. Reliability. Strength. The ability to step up when it counted. And for the first time in a long time, Jamal felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Weeks passed, and true to her word, Olivia kept her promise. Jamal started at the site the very next day, working his way up from the ground floor, just like he always had. The work was hard, but that didn't scare him. He put in the hours, stayed late when needed, took on the jobs no one else wanted. He learned fast, listened, proved himself the way he had always known he could. And people noticed. Within months, he was promoted to a senior crew position, then to a site supervisor. It wasn't just his work ethic, it was his ability to lead, to think on his feet, to take care of the people around him. The same thing that had made him stop for Liam that day made him someone people wanted to follow. Then, one day, an offer came, a management position, a real one, a stable one, the kind of job that meant he could finally do what he had set out to do in the first place, bring his mother to the city, get her the care she needed, make sure she never had to worry about bills again. And so, months after that fateful day, Jamal found himself standing at the train station, watching as his mother stepped onto the platform, her tired but warm eyes searching for him in the crowd. When she saw him, she smiled a real, full smile, one he hadn't seen in years. He led her to the apartment he had secured for them, a modest but comfortable space, so much better than the crumbling house they had struggled to hold on to back home, and as she looked around, taking in the place her son had built for them, she turned to him and placed a hand over his. "You did it, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. "I knew you would." Jamal exhaled, looking around at everything, the apartment, the job, the future that had finally started to feel like his. He thought about Liam, about Olivia, about how one decision, one moment of choosing to help instead of walking away, had changed the course of everything. Then he smiled, squeezed his mother's hand, and said, "Yeah, Mama, I did." Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.